Well, I'm Oswald Hall of Melbourne, Australia. And this is Eltham, a suburb of Melbourne. And Barbara came and visited us here at this house. And we're going to show you where he came and what he did. He came up in the car here. He pulled up here and got out of the car. It was a cold winter's day, so I had an umbrella. I'd come down to hand him up. And I'd built this little path out of this little cliff in anticipation of his coming, so that it would be an easy way up for him. And of course, I have to go and do the wrong thing. I hand him out of the car here with the umbrella and make him step up this great huge steep bit instead of here where he should have been. And he did it, although he had this bad hip. He went up there like a leopard. No trouble at all. So we went up here onto the terrace. Later, he stood on the terrace here and looked around the garden and remarked how beautiful it was. And then, turning slightly to the east, he said, "This house is very well situated." Of course, it was midwinter, as I said, and everything was dripping wet and looked very dreary. But he still seemed to appreciate it. And we had a big fire going inside and had the house very warm. And we came in here, and Barbara entered and met Betty. When Barbara was in, he greeted Betty very tenderly and looked around, and we ushered him over to this couch by the window. And he sat down for a while, and the men stood behind the couch. That is Ardi, Erich, Maggie, and Nilu. He asked us about the house because, you see, we had built it ourselves, so we told him about that. And it's made of mud brick. The house is made of mud brick, and we built it ourselves, and Barbara was very interested to know all the details about it. So then he wanted to inspect the house. So we get up, and he walks over here and looks out this door, and as the house was still being built, the rafters up here still showed sky through it. And he looked very dubiously, turned around to me with that very odd, quizzical smile, and at all the water dripping down. Then he came across here, and he went into the kitchen, looked around there. Well, Barbara came across here and looked into the kitchen, walked around, examined everything very closely, and showed a lot of interest. I don't know what in, but he was very interested. And then walked down this passageway. Barbara took me down the passageway here. He had a quick look round the corner. And then he went into the bathroom here. And a rather amusing incident occurred. He made the most delightful little mime of when he saw the shower, he put his hand up like this and went. It was so delightful. Well, Barbara came back and seated again on the couch. And but he was sitting on this side, and I was standing in front of him. And he continued to show a lot of interest in the house. He was looking up there, and he said, a lot of love has gone into the building of this house. It made Ben and I smile, actually, because we both thought of the same thing, which was the incredible amount of swearing I used to go on with while building, you know.
Yes, I remember that very well.
And then he called for quiet. And there was silence for about a minute. And then Barbara said, after this quiet time, Barbara said through Erich, this house has now been blessed. House has now been blessed. He said, this house has now been blessed. Live in it always. And be happy. And don't sell it or let it for money. So we regard this as a sort of charge. And that's what we've been doing ever since.
You've had this house now a long time. Is that right?
Yes. It was just about finished in 1956 when he visited it. But there's been a lot of additions since. And we've got a lot of memories of it. So, after a few more exchanges, which I don't remember, he jumped up and said that we've got to get going. And
What did he say?
we've got to get going. He had a very tight schedule, as usual. He was keeping to a strict timetable. And so he slapped me on the back like any friend would do and said, as if he was saying, right, let's get on the road, mate. And off we went out the door. And I was to drive him back to Camberwell. So we backed down the drive and went out. And he said, you are a good driver, he said to me. I remember thinking, I sure am now, Barbara. Now, let's see. Another thing he said, the next thing I think he said to me was, you can never know how fortunate you are to be driving, Papa. And then further on, down at the, what's called Eltham Park, just beyond there, at the corner, he indicated the bush and said, it is all very beautiful. It all came out of me, but it is all illusion. So we sped on very fast. He seemed to be pleased the faster we went. And we seemed to outstrip other cars that were following. There was Erich and Francis in the back and Barbara beside me when I was driving. The top of the hill going out of Eltham, Another incident which is of interest, I think, he made a characteristic gesture with his hands, a sort of buzzing motion like that with his hands, towards a girl on a horse. And having seen this action before, I took note of the girl, and it's interesting that about 7 years later, she walked into our lives. Anyway, I think the rest of the journey was without incident, except Dennis came up and showed, Dennis O'Brien came up to the car and showed us a shortcut to his place. So we followed it round with screaming tyres and arrived at Camberwell. The point of this is that this girl became to love Barbara later, and of course she never knew till she'd met everybody here that this incident had occurred in the car, and that it was just checking back later that we realised it must have been her. A lot of people who haven't seen Barbara in physical form have asked what it was like in his presence. And it's quite a point, because in one sense, the back of one's mind, one is aware that that here is the embodiment of infinite power and knowledge. Of infinite power, knowledge and bliss. But he himself conveys this wonderful feeling of spontaneity and naturalness. As he has said, a perfect master displaces nothing. Well, we with our egos displace a lot of space. He, on the other hand, is the perfect guest, because he just didn't impress his some nature foreign to him on anybody. He was so natural, it was simply a joy to be with him. And I better come.
I had met Barbara down at Dennis O'Brien's place in Camberwell, and it was a very wonderful experience to be embraced by him. And but when I found that he was coming here to our house, I was so overwhelmed, the thought of somebody like that coming into our house, that I just didn't seem to be able to take it all in, so that I'm afraid that I have great gaps in the memory of all the little details. It was just this wonderful presence here that seemed to overflow into the whole place and into me, and I think to everybody that happened to be here at the same time. And I'm afraid that I can't go into details or any great thoughts or anything that I had. It was just this wonderful feeling. When I first met Barbara at Camberwell, he embraced me and then asked if there was anything that I wanted to say, but I'm afraid that I was so overcome that I just started to cry, but they were terribly happy tears, and it really didn't seem to matter, and I wasn't embarrassed about it because it was just the effect that he had on me, and I wasn't really able to say anything very much at all. And it was just a wonderful, comforting feeling to know that I was able to do this, and it was all right.
Rather curious coincidence happened when Barbara came to Melbourne. I was called up for jury duty, and on the day before, we sat there a good deal of the day while the clerk of courts pulled out names out of a hat, out of 30 people or so, and 12 were picked for that day, and then we had to come back on the Monday. I was very worried about this. And then on the Monday, there weren't many people left. But so I was sitting very tensely in the court in the morning, and there was a meeting with Barbara later. And I was concentrating very strongly on Barbara, while the man picked names out of the hat and read them. And then my attention strayed a bit, and I was looking over the other side of the court. And suddenly I realised I wasn't paying attention. I looked back, and the man had a piece of paper in his hand, and he dropped it and fumbled for it. And I concentrated on Barbara, and I could see him on the dark wood of the bench. And when the man fumbled and picked out another name, this figure of Barbara I could see winked. And so anyway, I wasn't picked, and I rushed off to the meeting in time. And when he was going at the airport, he called me over and he said, "What's this jury business?" And looked at me rather mischievously and just left it at that. It was evident that he knew all about it.
When Barbara came to Queensland, was at Keel Mountain. Ossie went up to be with him, but I didn't go. But one morning when I was just sweeping the house, the most wonderful feeling came on me, and really the only word I could really say was that it was blissful, and that I felt that if anything had happened, anything bad or anything, it wouldn't have mattered. And, of course, when Ossie came back, I told him about what had happened. So he asked me the time and the day that this happened. And it turned out that it happened to be exactly at the same time that Ossie was talking to Barbara, and that Barbara had been asking about me. And that was the exact time that this wonderful feeling came to me.
Yes, well, while I was seeing Barbara personally, he said, "Where is Betty? Why didn't she come up?" And I just told him that just one of us came. And he turned to her, made a few signs, but he also turned sideways to me with a very penetrating look. And then he said, "It's all right that Betty didn't come."